Few rebellions in Scottish history have inspired such brutality as the Covenanters' Rebellion of 1679, which climatised the Battle of Bothwell Brig. But little did the Covenanters know that their hell was only just beginning. The restoration of King Charles II to the throne of Scotland was not well received by the strictly devoutly religious elements within Scotland, especially those who had served under the Cromwellian administration known as the Presbyterians. Those who had served Cromwell's regime were punished and usually executed, and the very few who were pardoned, well, they seem to have just been forgiven. But under the increasing pressure to change their convictions, some were placated by the government's support of their church, but not of episcopacy. However, the more dedicated Covenanters continued to hold secret meetings from the King's army, and as the persecution got more rampant, the meetings got more violent. There's a case in Glasgow where Robert Hamilton of Preston tried to nail the Covenanters' decree up to the Market Cross in Glasgow, and this was disrupted by government dragoons, including led by John Graham of Claverhouse, commonly known as Bonnie Dundee, later during the 1689 Jacobite Revolt. Now, eventually, they would become more and more violent. After the murder of Archbishop Sharp, they would try to attack Glasgow itself, which was only stalled because Claverhouse met them at Drumclog. He was defeated, but it bought time enough to stall the Covenanters and retreat to Glasgow to rearm and also defend the city. Following this success, the Covenanters spent the next few weeks building their strength, as so did the government. Charlie's son James, the Duke of Monmouth, was sent north to take command of the militia that were raised to combat this rebellion. As mentioned, the government troops had barricaded Glasgow, and the Covenanters were easily repulsed. They halted at the position occupied the previous night, but on Claverhouse's advancing toward them, retreated to Hamilton in Lanarkshire. As Claverhouse was too weak to attack them there, they formed a camp, and according to Hamilton himself, within a week 5,000 or 6,000 men were there in total. Hamilton took all the credit for the victory at Drumclog and assumed command without any ceremony or official statement to recognise him as such. Time was spent in, well, theological disputes, apparently. Now, the Covenanters, as mentioned, had settled in this town, and like most rebellions of their nature, were not equipped. They had very little ammunition, lack of discipline, and far too many religious disputes. There were few competent commanders, including Robert Hamilton of Preston himself. Now, this army was again larger than the government forces, around 6,000 individuals, but the army was certainly outmatched by the well-trained, equipped and experienced government troops under the Duke of Monmouth and Viscount Dundee. The battle centred on Bothwell Bridge, over the River Clyde in the west of Scotland. Monmouth was required to force the army over the bridge in order to fully confront the Covenanter force of around 6,000. Now, initial defences were successful in repelling minor skirmishes, but soon they succumbed to the lack of ordnance, artillery, ammunition, and, well, discipline. Within about an hour and a half, the Covenanters had completely been overrun, causing their lines to fracture and the force to ensue a wide-scale retreat. Many escaped to the parks of neighbouring Hamilton Palace, the residence of Duchess Anne, who was sympathetic to the Presbyterian cause, and the final killings took place here. The casualties were estimated to around 600 to 700. These numbers do vary depending on historiographical analysis, and though this number has been disputed, there are other cases, unsupported claims I may say, of killing in the aftermath of the battle. The Covenanters would subsequently be forced on a march of hell. A march to a location that did not have the facilities nor even the space to contain such a vast amount of prisoners, numbering around 1,200 roughly. Moreover, the winter was approaching, and by the end of it, only a few hundred would remain out of the over 1,000 prisoners taken that day. Now, they were taken to Edinburgh in a place near the Royal Mile called Greyfriars, known today for Greyfriars Churchyard, Greyfriars Bobby, and other such locations. And not many realise that this location saw the death of hundreds of people left to rot as if they were, well, carcasses. Many of these men were fed almost nothing, only a mere crumb of bread, thus marking the Covenanters' prison as something akin to a concentration camp, you see. Not quite as severe, but still horrendous. They were fed, well, rations equivalent to that you see in places such as Auschwitz, but many of these prisoners were tortured and executed for treason, and some were, well, not pardoned, but simply allowed to live. Not that this was much of a life, whereas some were simply, again, left to rot for the winter months without proper protection from the harsh, cold elements. Eventually, later near the end of winter, many of these Covenanters were taken down to the town of Leith, now part of Edinburgh since 1921, and were set sail on ships bound for the North American colonies. However, storms and rough conditions meant that many of these ships were lost at sea, seeing further Covenanter casualties, and the ones that did make it never returned to their homeland. This marked a period known in Protestant historiography as the Killing Times. The Scottish Privy Council organised a extrajudicial execution of any Covenanters caught in arms, policies carried out by troops under the 1st Viscount Dundee. Defeat divided the movement into moderates and extremists, with the latter being led by John Cargill and Richard Cameron, who released the Sanka Declaration in June 1680. While Covenanters had now pretty much rejected entirely loyalty to either Charles or his Catholic brother James, Cameronians were adherents, and although being a small group, the deaths of Cameron, his brother and Cargill elicited widespread compassion. The 1681 Scottish Secession and Tests Act established a legal responsibility to obey the monarch regardless of religion, and also confirmed the Kirk's primacy as the currently constituted. This excluded the Covenanters, who wished to return it to the structure that existed in 1640. Several government officials, including James Dalrymple, Chief Legal Officer, and Archibald Campbell, 9th Earl of Argyll, refused to swear because the Act included errors. Argyll was convicted of treason and ordered to death. However, he and Dalrymple fled to the Dutch Republic. Well, I hope you found today's video interesting. I enjoyed researching this. I really enjoy sharing stories from near where I live, or just in general from my country. So if you'd like to see more Scottish history, I'll pop more onto the channel. I do have a playlist already with Mary King's Close and the Oliver Cromwell video I did. But if you'd like to see more, please comment below. If I missed anything out, any errors, please feel free to correct me. Just make it respectful, you know. We're all good chums here. Now, that's it for today's video. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.